Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Peter Hunt, Marketing Manager here at ActionPoint. We will get started in the next couple of minutes, so sit tight for now. Looking forward to kicking off today's content. Hello and welcome to today's this week's edition of Ask Me Anything, our weekly webinar where we ask your questions and we try to answer them. Might be the right way around. Fantastic to see so many people here with us today. We'll get to our speaker in just a second. I just wanted to go through a little bit of housekeeping. First off, a bit of a background on ActionPoint. So we've been working in the remote working space for quite a long time now. We've been very busy in recent weeks servicing many of you with your remote working requirements. Just want to take an opportunity to acknowledge some of the challenging circumstances that many of our clients find themselves in. We're not immune to the current restrictions with COVID-19. And just wanted to say, if you have any questions or any concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Finian at any time, even after the webinar. For those of us who are new to ActionPoint, we're happy to field your questions as well, and happy to service any of your inquiries. Just wanted to say there's a Q&A throughout the webinar, so if you just drop your questions into the question box, we'll get to those right at the end. Finian will go through a quick 20-minute presentation first, and then we'll get to all your questions. Yeah, that's kind of it from me. Before we kick off today, and before I introduce today's speaker, I'd just like to put a poll up. So if you could take just a second to answer today's poll. Now it's a bit fanciful, so you have to kind of use your imagination. But saying if the current COVID-19 restrictions were lifted tomorrow, how many days per week would you opt to work from home? So assuming everything goes back to normal, kids go back to school, colleges go back on, and you're back in the office, how many days per week would you opt to work from home? 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days plus, or 0 days? Please take a second to answer that poll. And while you're answering that poll, I'm going to introduce today's speaker. It's Finian Nally, who's our head of Microsoft Cloud Solutions. Finian is the Microsoft technology lead here at ActionPoint, and has been working very closely with clients to assist them on their remote working journeys. Finian brings 15 years of experience to his role at ActionPoint and is very well positioned to speak on today's topic. He'll be taking us through the features of Microsoft Teams and how better you can use it to improve your remote working situation. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Finian.
Great, Peter. Thanks very much. You might just close down that poll as well, if you don't mind. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining me. Just to prove I am working from home like everyone else, I'll say a quick hello over video. So what we've got on today is really all about Microsoft Teams, and we're going to be covering a few key areas. We want to give you an overview of Teams for those of you who've never used Teams before. It's for your first time using it, give you a sense of what it is. We're then going to dive a bit deeper in and specifically talk about how Teams can help with remote working. We'll go into a bit of a demo then as well and show you Teams in action. And as well as that, we're going to discuss, I suppose, the more holistic side, how to be successful with Microsoft Teams. You know, it's all well and good showing the technology, but We'll give you some tips on how to be successful with it. And thereafter, we'll go into some questions. So as Peter said, there's a question box there. Ask your questions throughout, and we'll aim to get through them at the very, very end. So first and foremost, this is a question I suppose I ask people on a regular basis. You know, it's I suppose more prevalent now, or more relevant now, and it's really, what does teamwork look like for you today? And it's coming from the basis that this idea of teamwork and remote working really has been has come to most of us very, very rapidly. Some of us have worked from home before, maybe most of us haven't worked from home before, and the reality of adapting and moving quickly to get up to speed with how teamwork works and how remote working works hasn't been very straightforward. And what we've seen out there right now is that people are using lots of different tools, you know, trying their best to get things done, trying to remote work effectively, but really there's a lot of fragmentation out there. So, you know, we need to start to look at, right, how do we start to reduce that fragmentation? How do we start to make it easy for people to work remotely more effectively? And one of the key tools to do that is with Microsoft Teams. Again, in speaking with our clients over the last number of weeks, you know, Teams has probably become the single greatest topic of discussion throughout all of the varying conversations we're having around remote working. And, you know, the simple answer is, what is Microsoft Teams, or what is it? And really, it's the hub for teamwork within 365. Some people are saying to us, well, Teams is very new, you know, I've never seen it before. The reality of Teams is it's 3 years old as of 2 weeks ago, so it's a very, very mature product. And up until a month ago, 33 million individuals were using that on a day-to-day basis. And what's really amazing is, over the last 2 weeks alone, an additional 11 million users have started using Teams. So what we're seeing is a very, very mature platform, a platform that's trusted by businesses across the globe, and a platform that's been the go-to tool, I suppose, for businesses to ensure that their team and their staff are working effectively while they're working from home. So to touch briefly on, you know, what are the key features? What makes Teams so good? Why is it the hub for teamwork within 365? So some of the key things: first off, one-on-one chat. I have the ability to do instant message with people, communicate very, very effectively and very, very rapidly. And I can not only do that on a one-to-one basis, but I can also do that on a one-to-many basis. And I'll be going much deeper into all of these features in a little while. Secondly, it allows us to deliver powerful online meetings. So I'm able to bridge the gap. I'm able to actually have those face-to-face conversations, which previously were difficult when people were remote. All of those meeting-based conversations, or meeting room conversations, I can now have very, very interactively and very, very easily. In addition, I can bring in enterprise calling features. So my standard landline and telephony system that I used to have, you know, be reliant on our PBX in-house, I'm now able to take that and use the power of Microsoft Teams to deliver the same phone calling experience, both internally with our team, but also externally to our clients as well. In addition, being, I suppose, a key element within the Microsoft 365 suite, Teams encompasses all the elements of that. So our Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all the apps that we're using on a day-to-day basis natively integrate with Teams. So we're easily able to streamline our work and reduce and minimize that jumping between various applications when we're trying to deliver a piece of work. It's also a very, very powerful platform. And what that means is, I suppose, Microsoft have looked at this and said, we understand that people use lots of different tools, not only Microsoft tools on their day-to-day work. And what Teams enables us to do is to front end or be a jump off point into many of those third-party tools, be it an account system, a CRM system, or whatever other system, but still ensure that our team are working together, collaborating from a central location. I suppose one thing to point out, and you know, this is across the Microsoft 365 suite, but I suppose it's more and more relevant to Teams, is the constant innovation that's there within Teams right now. You know, we're in a world where when we purchase a product, or previously when we purchased a software product, often that would remain static until we went to the next version or did the next upgrade in 3 to 5 years' times. With Teams, we're seeing constant innovation. We're seeing things like inline message translation. So if we're working with colleagues across borders who may speak a different language, we're seeing the ability to give live captions and subtitles during meetings. We're seeing the ability to work on different mobile devices and also do things like blur my background. You know, if I'm working from my own office, which happens to be my kitchen table or my bedroom, I'm able to blur out the background so people are focused on me and we're focused on doing work. So that consistent innovation is there with Teams, and it's, you know, a product that we see giving real value to businesses on a consistent basis. So to dive into some of those features, how are they relevant to remote working? And one of the slides I use on a regular basis when speaking with people was that the needs of teams are changing, that how we work are changing. And the numbers on this were, I suppose, somewhat correct going back a few months, but the reality is they've been blown out of the water in the last few weeks. I used to say 72% of employees will be working remotely, at some point this year. The reality is we're all working remotely. A third of meetings will be virtual in nature. Certainly in Action Point, all of our meetings are virtual in nature. They cannot be any other way. So the numbers in here have dramatically changed, and thus the way we work has dramatically changed. So how does Teams help us do that? So starting at the start, I mentioned one-on-one instant messaging chat. How does that relate to remote working? What can we actually do? So if we think about the old way we used to work was traditionally over email. And often I would send a one-liner email to a colleague or to a number of colleagues. Have you got that file for me? Have you got that person's phone number? What are you working on now? When are you available today? All very, very small pieces of information and all very small emails. But the reality is people get so many emails on a day-to-day basis. People are doing so many different things that often you may have expected an instant response over email, but email was never really designed for that. So if we look at bringing that type of communication into Microsoft Teams, that one-to-one quick instant message chat is fully featured in there. And the screenshot you're seeing there right is in front of you right now is a screenshot from my own Teams client last week, where I had 13 separate conversations going on throughout the day. Now they were probably 13 multiplied by I don't know how many different emails that I did not need to send, that I didn't need to send out annoying people, or I didn't need to send out getting lost in various people's email. I was able to use the power of Teams, number one, to see was that person online, to see were they active, did they have a green dot beside them, or did they have an orange dot insofar as they were actually away. If they had that green dot, I was able to send them a quick message, hey, can you help us work with this? I'm setting up a webinar, can you help me? And I was able to get a very, very quick response. So it really improved the way I work. It really allowed me to do things a lot more efficiently. From there, and again, thinking about remote working, Teams allows me to bring back that face-to-face contact. It can be very easy, I suppose, to sit behind a desk and sit behind a monitor and again get bogged down in email conversation that oftentimes take a long time. It can be miscommunicated and really slow down the process of working. Whereby if we change that into that kind of email group communication into a video communication and leverage the power of Microsoft Teams, we're actually able to get work done much more efficiently. So I can not only schedule video calls with people, so I can have ad hoc video calls. So I can start an instant message with someone, quickly elevate that into a video call, and then actually extend that further and use some of the features within Microsoft Teams. So for example, share my desktop. I might want to share a Word document or a PowerPoint document. I might want to blur the background so that, again, you can't see my kitchen table or bedroom. But I also might want to record that because, we might have 2 or 3 people on that video calls on that particular call, but it turns out another 5 or 6 of our colleagues cannot make it. So at the click of a button, we can instantly record that call so that our colleagues can pick it up and view it at a later time. I suppose the advantage with Microsoft Teams is that it's doing that very, very seamlessly. There's no complexity to it. There's no worrying about, I have to bring in phone providers or third-party systems or anything like that. It becomes very, very easy to have that, I suppose, face-to-face conversation that right now most of us are not able to have. From there, I suppose, getting into the core of Teams, getting into the main team area within the Teams product. Some of the things we've seen work really, really well is delivering organizational-wide teams. So right now, Action Point is no different to, I'm sure, many of your businesses, where there's a lot of communication going on right now. What are the latest COVID-19 guidelines? How is our business adapting to it? How do you work remotely? What HR issues, have arisen as a result of all of this? And again, all of that information traditionally is siloed in email or maybe siloed in some kind of intranet site. Chances are some employees will see that information and actually read it, but the majority won't, and the majority will forget about it and have to do follow-ups. Hey, what's our stance on COVID-19? What's our stance on remote working? How do I get equipment for this? So using organizational-wide teams, we can actually put all that and channel all that communication in through Teams and allow people to digest that when they're ready. Maybe it's the latest remote working tips, maybe it's advice from HR, Maybe it's, just general company updates, and all of that is put into Microsoft Teams, which means then I can look at that at 9 o'clock in the morning when that post happened, or I can look at it at 5 o'clock in the evening when I've done all my other work and I'm actually ready to do it. And in addition, 6 weeks later, when I want to go, well, I wonder what our company communicated out on the HR front about our annual leave entitlements during all of this, I can instantly jump back into Microsoft Teams, into the HR section, and see exactly what was said. So it becomes very, very easy to communicate out at an organizational level. Outside of that, then, when we get into actually working in projects, I suppose, doing what we're doing up on a day-to-day basis, be it that I'm part of the sales team or the marketing team or the finance team, or that I'm working across a multitude of different teams across varying projects, both internally and externally. Teams brings all of that communication together. It brings all of those pieces of the project together, not only the people, but the files, the various conversations, and the various third-party applications and tools. It brings all that together centrally. So the example you can see on screen there, I have a go-to-market plan. Over on the left-hand side, I have the various elements of that. Maybe it's the go-to-market piece, it's the digital assets, it's the R&D part. Up the top, highlighted in the red book or in the red box, we can see we have the posts, the conversation, those quick and simple conversations that people are having about that piece of work. We can also see all the files related to it. Maybe it's a Word, Excel, or PowerPoint file. We can see when they were modified, who put them up there. We can then extend that further and say, well, actually, we need a project plan around this piece of work. Let's put that project plan within Teams as well. So again, it's central to me. I can easily access that very, very readily, information within context. The beauty about Teams is, I suppose, it can go much, much further than that. So for example, in this same project, if we had some performance data or some financial data that we had, siloed off in Power BI, for example, we can surface that to the front and say, well, actually, not only are people getting the conversation and being able to work on the files around that project, we're also able to use the intelligent tools within the business and surface that information so that people can see it in context relevant to that particular project. And lastly, really, Teams can be extended much, much further than that. I keep using the example of Teams being your jump-off point into other applications. A good example of that is the one you're seeing on screen right now. And this was an application that Microsoft themselves built about 4 or 5 weeks ago, a crisis management tool. So when all this COVID-19 thing was kicking off in Europe and the US, they needed a tool internally with Microsoft, but also found that some of their clients needed a tool to rapidly, I suppose, get information and distribute information to teams around crisis management. So they used what's called Power Apps to quickly build this tool. And then they said, well, actually, do you know what? Where's a good place to put this? How do we get this tool into people's hands? And they put it in Microsoft Teams to say, hey, here's a crisis management tool. Maybe it's relevant for you. Likewise, we could have built an expenses tool. We could have built an annual leave tool. We could have built a varying amount of tools that, I suppose, are streamlining our processes, are eliminating those paper-based tasks, which we can no longer do, but ultimately front-ending it to a tool that people are using on a day-to-day basis, that people are familiar with on a day-to-day basis. So that's a bit of slideware. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into a quick demo of a demo Teams client that I have. So what you're seeing on screen right now is what a typical Teams client looks right now. Over on the left-hand side, I have my key menu buttons, my activity, what has been going on a day-to-day basis, my chats, any of the instant messages that have been back and forth to me, the teams that I'm part of, all of those pieces of work within context. So if we take it through, we can see activity. Okay, Alex has mentioned me in a few different conversations. I should probably go and look at that and maybe reply to him. If I jump into chat, I can instantly see, right, who is available and who's online. So I can see, right, I've had some conversations there with Alex. Right, actually, who is Alex? Where does he sit in my organization? So I can instantly look at him and look at the organization and say, well, actually, I can see he reports into Miriam. Ah, yes, I know he's part of the marketing team. Also, if I look at him right now, I can see, great, he has this green dot beside him, which means it's available. But Alex has also put in a comment here to say, hey, I'm working from home, ping me anytime. So I can instantly send him a message and say, hi, Alex, how's it going? And very, very easily, Alex can reply back to me and say, all is well. So we're able to deliver that very, very quick communication. Maybe that was an email before, like I previously said, but now we're getting responses very, very quickly, and we're able to understand who's online and who isn't. And in addition, I could easily elevate that call into a video call or a voice call with Alex. And what's more than that, I could invite in more people to say, actually, we've developed this quick conversation, but now it requires input from someone else within our team or someone else outside of our team. Let's just press one button and add a person in, and they can be involved in that conversation as well. But then go into my main Teams window, I can see all the pieces of work that I'm involved in. I mentioned earlier on about having an organizational wide team, and this is one I've just put together here. We call it My Company Hub. So I can see I've got HR details in here. I've got some latest COVID-19 updates. I can see Megan has put in the latest advice on hand washing. And if I look into the file section here, I can see that same file on hand washing is in here. I can quickly open that up and see, how do I wash my hands properly kind of thing. So very, very quick. I'm not jumping out into third-party applications. I'm seeing everything from where I am. And if I look at the latest company updates, I can see Megan has posted something here. Here's some information about some Teams training. Alex has then asked, are there any Teams webinars available? And I can simply reply back and go, yes, there's one today. So very, very quick conversation, very, very easy to happen. And again, all the information I need within context. But as well as that, I can say, well, actually, we don't just want a conversation. We don't just want files in here. Maybe there's other types of information. Maybe we want to publish out a forum for people to work. I'm working from home, so do you know what? I need a new webcam and I need a new laptop. The equipment I have isn't working. So rather than going off and finding, how do I ask permission for that? How do I request that? Our team has decided, well, let's build a form for someone to ask that information. Let's put it in our organizational wide team so people can easily jump in, submit their requests, and the person responsible for taking those requests can easily get that information and act on that very, very quickly. So we're streamlining our process. We're making it easier for people to ask for things, but we're also making it easier for people to do their job. And just to jump down into a few examples of another team. So here's that go-to-market one I mentioned earlier on. So we can see lots of conversations have happened in here. The beauty about this is, let's say this team was made up of 5 people and we had, for example, a new head of marketing started today. Typically, how would they get up to speed with what was going on within the business, what was going on with a given project? Because the reality was a lot of that information was siloed in a file server or siloed in reply to all emails that had gone across the team. Now that person starting today can quickly look through the conversation thread and can see, okay, we had a number of meetings. We can see people gave commentary on what was going on here. We can see a number of files were created. Okay, what are those files? When were they created? Who created them? And I can get all the information very, very rapidly. So the fact that I'm now new into this team means that, okay, I know what's going on. I know how the project got there. So now I can start to give very, very valuable input very, very quickly. That's a sweeping summary of Teams, and just I'm conscious of the time we have today. I'm happy to go into it in more detail if anyone has any queries thereafter. But in summary, thinking about Teams and thinking about remote working, there's really 3 key areas to it. One is that quick, effective communication, doing that instant messaging, doing that video calling. And that video calling is not limited just to internal people. That can be extended to your customers, your partners, external people just as well. We use it extensively across ActionPoint. Many of our customers do as well, and it is the core communication tool for us right now. Secondly is information within context. So I'm bringing all that information together that previously was siloed in lots of different locations that I had to go searching for either through email or file servers or connect to VPNs or ultimately be a painful process to connect to. Teams centralizes all of that communication around a team, a project, a department, or a piece of work. And lastly, that ability to extend it, to add in things like Power BI to surface data, to add in things like Power Platform applications that help improve line of business processes, or even to add in simple forms to request information from staff and streamline those processes very, very easily. So while that's great from a technology point of view, what are the keys to success? What are the things that we as end user or we as businesses, when we're communicating about to our teams, how do we start to make this successful? How do we start to make sure this is going to be effective for people? First and foremost, and this is probably one of the single biggest things, is equipment. There's often, or we see it on a regular basis, where someone has a poor experience, be it in Skype or Teams or whatever tool they're using, and they instantly point the finger at the tool. The reality is, if you're not using correct and certified equipment, you're going to have a poor experience. And I suppose certified equipment doesn't necessarily mean expensive. So for example, my own setup here, I'm using a laptop, I have a Dell monitor, and I have a Logitech webcam which does both my video and my sound. That's it. I have nothing fancy. I have no, high-end equipment in here. But because it's certified to work with Teams, it works. The quality is always there. I get that same reliable experience consistently. So that's number one. Make sure you're giving your staff the correct equipment, and that you yourself are using correct equipment. Secondly, and I suppose this has been a good conversation internally with ActionPoint over the last few weeks, is your actual workspace. In order to make this remote working successful, it's important that you try as best as possible to have a workplace. Be it you're lucky enough to have an office within your house, maybe that office is the end of your kitchen table, the sitting room, a corner in the back bedroom, somewhere like that. But designate that space as your workspace. Have it set up as best as possible. Have the equipment, the best equipment that you can, be it an external monitor or a simple webcam or something like that. But at least that becomes your work zone, and you're able to set your hours around that, right? When I'm in this zone, I'm in work mode. When I'm not in it, I'm not in work mode. I am actually at home. Some other little tips are around video. Get your video set up correct. Make sure you have that webcam that works effectively, and as much as possible, turn video on. Certainly, we have a policy within ActionPoint that it's video on by default. We want people to see each other. We want people to interact with each other. And what we actually find is that things move much quicker. Meetings get done much, much faster when people have their video on, because you can see the expression, you can see the commentary on it, and people get to understand and feel what's going on, as well as hear what's going on. In terms of collaboration, it's using the tools within Teams very, very effectively. So, I mentioned earlier on about sharing documents. When you're in a meeting, you have the ability to share your desktop or share a document or a number of documents. So the old way of doing meetings was we put a document on the screen, everyone took notes, and people then went away and spent hours updating that same document. But with the power of Teams, we're actually able to, minimize those steps and edit a document in real time together. So multiple people can work on the same document at the same time. In addition, we can set up those very, very rapid meetings to start that process or continue that process very, very easily. It's important though, when using Teams, that you almost apply the same rules you do to a normal I'm going to the boardroom type meeting. That beforehand you're prepping for the meeting. Have I got the files? Do we have the minutes of the last meeting? What are we actually going to talk about? Have we got an agenda? That during their meeting you're using tools like co-authoring, like I mentioned, that people are updating the meeting notes, and afterwards that people are saying, right, actually, have we got any additional notes? Let's put that into the same meeting. Let's review the recording if we need to, but have that all centrally. So, as much as possible, the rules that you had before meetings, try and apply them after meetings as well. It's important as well that there are, I suppose, more holistic things to consider, especially in this kind of new world that we're living in right now. And this is something we try to communicate an awful lot to our internal teams, is that, with remote working, it's, we're no longer having those kind of water cooler conversations or conversations we had in the hallway with people, asking them about their family life, about their, what's going on holidays, all of those kind of things. We're not having those anymore. So it's important to have those more holistic conversations, push the boat out and say, do you know what, I'm going to set up a virtual coffee break at 11 o'clock today with 3 or 4 people, or we're going to have a virtual water cooler chat at 3 o'clock on Friday and invite a lot of people in. And the first rule about those conversations is there's to be no work talk in here. Let's just see how everyone's getting on. Let's see what the challenges are out there for people. How are they balancing minding their kids and working at the same time? Is it about adjusting hours? Is it about using technology? What is it there? So, as much as possible, use Teams and leverage Teams to do those softer touch things as much as you would with those business things. I think management have a key role to play in that as well. And, it's important that management lead by example and check in on the staff. We've seen some organizations at 9 o'clock every morning, they just have a standard video call open up for anyone to join in. It's not mandatory to attend, but management are there. Any employee can drop in and ask whatever they want. It's nothing to do with work. It's nothing to do about checking in on performance. It's an open forum to say, hey, how are you getting on? And how can we help you work better together? So leveraging the tools to do things more holistically is very, very powerful as well. The very last thing to touch on is around resources. What's next and where do you go for the various resources? This is actually a new slide I have been using in the last few weeks. I just wanted to put it up briefly, and again, we'll circulate this after. I think one thing that's very important with Microsoft Teams is trust. We've seen a lot of, or some of you may have seen a lot of conversation in the media about some other providers, about free platforms about security issues and all of those kind of things. I suppose one thing to be very conscious of with Microsoft Teams is the foundation of it is built on trust, and it gives you those security controls from the get-go, security controls like multi-factor authentication and conditional access. But it's also giving you those much more granular controls like controlling who's in charge of a meeting, who's a presenter, who's an attendee, what are the rules for people being able to post, people not being able to post, who can access things internally, who can access things externally. It's giving you all of those controls built in from the ground up. So it is a trusted platform. It's an enterprise platform designed for companies large and small, and it works very, very effectively to do that. Lastly, on the training front, there's a link there, support.office.com/teams, and we'll give you lots and lots of video content. We'll dive much deeper than I went into today, go through things in a granular format, how you upload files, how you set up channels, all of those kind of things. And lastly, Action Point ourselves, we will be offering virtual training. So if you or your team feel that you need any kind of training on Teams or even on the wider Microsoft 365 suite, get in touch and we'll have a number of dates over the coming weeks. And with that, in the space of half an hour, I'm going to hand over to Peter for questions. So if you have any questions, just post them in the questions window there, and we'll answer them as best as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Finian, for another great webinar and a very interesting insight into Teams. So we've a good few questions coming in, but please do ask more. I just want to share the poll really quickly because I think there's some interesting data here. So just to recap on the question, if current COVID-19 restrictions were lifted, how many days per week would you opt to work from home? So if we take out the 0 days per week, about 87% of respondents would opt to work from home at least 1 day per week. And just to maybe put some context on that, the Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation did a remote working poll last year, and they found that 48.5% of people were working remotely. So roughly, we're looking at almost a doubling of numbers based on our, I suppose, smaller survey. That's an interesting shift in mindset and culture, Finian. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that and maybe why we're seeing figures like we are in the poll today?
Yeah, I think people have realized that, working from home is possible, working remotely is possible. In a lot of companies previously, there might have been a culture that extended from, historically within the company, or maybe it came from HR that, remote working was not allowed, people will be messing, it's a waste of time. And what we've seen with most businesses, actually, they've adapted to it very, very quickly. I suppose, speaking from my own experience, and, I've been working from home for the last 4 years almost, doing those 3 to 4 days a week from home is fine. But I think people need that kind of personal connection. It's great doing all of this stuff over video, but still there is no substitute from having that face-to-face conversation with people. So I think a good balance is important, and doing 2 to 3 days per week is a no-brainer for most businesses, but going beyond that might be a struggle for some people, missing that human face-to-face contact.
Good point, Finian. Thanks a million. Look, we'll jump into questions here. Question from Stephen: is there a ticketing system that can be used within Teams or an add-on product that does this?
There's no ticketing system natively within Teams. You can use something like Forms or something like that to get information, but it really depends on what you're looking for, Stephen. If it's a ticket to manage support cases or something like that, I would look at some of the dedicated providers that are out there for doing that. I'm trying to think, Zendesk is one that springs to mind. But again, you can use Teams to front end that. So in other words, you can put the link into Zendesk or any other product out of Teams, and people can use that as a jump off point.
Okay, very good. Message from Neve: hi Finian and team, thank you for another great webinar. Thank you, Neve. I have a question. When using Word/Excel, how do you save a document to the files on Teams? Is saving to OneDrive the same as saving to Teams? Can you save to both?
Yeah, so really there's a couple of questions in there. So I've used the analogy a few times that Teams is a jump off point. So when we look at those files that were in Teams, all of those files were actually stored in SharePoint. So again, because I'm using 365, SharePoint is natively part of that. So the files are not actually stored in Teams, they're sitting within SharePoint. What that means is the same security and the same rules that we apply to SharePoint apply through to those particular files. I suppose the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint, you may have heard of OneDrive, you may not have heard of SharePoint. Think of OneDrive as my documents. So they're the documents I use for myself, I'm not going to collaborate with anyone else on them. You know, they're kind of my documents, and that is your storage space. Whereas SharePoint is the documents that you're going to collaborate with people on. Hence, that's why it's in Teams. So there is a subtle difference. However, both OneDrive and SharePoint files are both stored within 365, meaning they're accessible from any device that you're on. I hope that answers that, Niamh.
Thank you, Finian. Chris Enright writes in, can the instant message function be used with people that do not have Microsoft 365, i.e. site operative working on smartphone only?
Yeah, so site operatives, you know, kind of frontline workers, those kind of people, there is a dedicated SKU for them within the Microsoft 365 suite. It's actually called Frontline Workers. So it gives them kind of core tools like Teams, like the security features, those kind of things. So often we see scenarios where some workers have absolutely no need for email. The business doesn't want to give them email, as well as them not having any usage for it. But a tool like Teams, where they could communicate over instant messaging, where they could, you know, take a photograph of their work, where they could complete their timesheet or something like that, is very valuable. So there is a particular SKU for kind of those frontline workers, site operatives within the 365 suite. In terms of guest access, guests can communicate via instant message if they're invited into a particular meeting. But again, that's very ad hoc. You know, you have to schedule the meeting, invite that person in, and the instant messaging can happen there, but that's only in the context of that meeting. So I think, Chris, what you're giving at there, the site operative, is that kind of frontline worker. So we certainly can discuss that with you in more detail.
Excellent, thank you. Suzanne McLaughlin, similar question to Niamh. Uploading files, do they need to be in SharePoint?
So that's where they end up, but I suppose the beauty with Teams is that the file can be any type of file. So it can be your standard Microsoft file, or it can be a PowerPoint file, it can be a CAD file, it can be an MP3 file, whatever you want kind of thing. So yes, the storage location is in SharePoint. I suppose I'd asterisk that by saying, I mentioned earlier on about the integration aspect of Teams, so that it integrates with many, many tools. So for example, Box is another enterprise file sharing solution. Teams integrates with that, so my files could be in Box. Likewise, Citrix ShareFile would be similar, and there are a number of other file sharing tools out there as well that Teams would have native integrations with.
Yeah, and I just think, Suzanne, from the user experience perspective, it is literally a case of opening up your team, attaching file, and it's shared within Teams, and people can access it. So, good question. When files are uploaded, are they? Sorry, excuse me, Tony. When files are uploaded, are they secure and accessible only to company team members?
Yeah, I suppose if we set up a team right now, and myself and Peter were the only two members of that, myself and Peter are the only two members who can access the files within that team. So yes, the rules are there out of the box to secure things, but I'd always stress that that's one layer of security. It's important that every business kind of looks at the kind of the outer layers of security within Teams. That number one, you're setting up things like multi-factor authentication, and it's important that pretty much everyone has multi-factor authentication enabled, and also that the business is setting up the rules around files and around Teams policies. For example, a simple rule is don't allow external sharing. You know, make sure that that is turned on within your business, so it prevents people accidentally sharing files externally.
Excellent. This is a tricky name. Duvaltek. Sorry, apologies for butchering your name there. Duvaltek. Can you recommend a shared calendar platform through Teams? I need to be able to schedule tasks quickly.
Yeah, I suppose Teams is built on your Outlook calendar. So again, the beauty of it, it's not trying to reinvent the wheel there. So whatever you can do it in your Outlook calendar maps across through Teams. So it allows you to share your calendar and share tasks. I suppose within the task management about assigning tasks to people, I'd be looking at something like Planner. So Planner, again, is part of 365. If you have 365 right now, you have Planner. So you can use that to schedule tasks and put dates around them and actually assign them to people. And again, that can be front-ended through Teams.
Excellent. Question from Gary, can you walk through uploading and downloading files, and why does formatting change?
I'm not going to do a walkthrough right now. Certainly we can send you on the training videos, and there's a video on that in the link that we'll forward on the deck after. In terms of formatting change, it's not something I've seen. You know, if you upload a file, be it a Word document, a PDF, that's the format it's in. I suppose the only way that would change is if I downloaded that file and I'm using an older version of for example, Word or something like that. So someone else has uploaded in the latest format and I'm using an older version, and so I'm not able to see those formatting changes.
Just could you speak specifically to maybe some header changes that might happen, or maybe text changes that might happen when it goes from your desktop into Teams, Finian? Have you seen anything like that?
No, there's nothing like that. It goes straight in. You know, you could add in additional rules around metadata tagging and those kind of things. That's kind of getting into the weeds, but from a day-to-day upload change point of view, there's none.
Okay, perfect. Would you recommend setting up a separate channel for each project you're working on? Question from Suzanne.
That's an it depends question, Suzanne. You know, there is no, I suppose, black and white with Teams insofar as, you know, that rule may apply for one person insofar as a separate channel for each project. For a different company, it may be a separate team for each project. It really depends on how you work. It depends on the security you want to apply. It depends on things like, are you bringing in external people into the teams and security? So a lot of it is based around security. So no straight answer on that one, unfortunately. So
just from a practicality perspective, Finian, because I know we've obviously worked in teams for quite a while. I guess creating a new team for every new project can be a little bit cumbersome. I know from the Action Point perspective, we'll have our set sales team, and then within that sales team, then we'll have our various channels. So it could be, you know, marketing events, it could be, you know, sales opportunities, it could be, you know, public sector, you know, within that same team. So I think there's maybe just a practicality to it as well. So there's not too much noise on your team as well. I think that's an important point to note. Okay, thank you, Suzanne. Gary O'Sullivan. I just have does from Gary O'Sullivan. Is that the full question? I'll come back to that. If a video conversation is being recorded, are all users notified automatically of this?
yeah, they are, and that goes back to one of the trust features within the platform. You know, if I'm allowed to click record a meeting and I actually clicked it, a bar appears up the top for all attendees that the meeting is being recorded.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay, a question from Alex. What is the licensing model? What plans is it included, and when is it an add-on?
Yeah, so for Microsoft Teams is included with the vast majority of 365 plans. So Microsoft 365 Business, Business Essentials, Business Premium. The only place it's not included is if you're using some of the very, very basic plans. For example, Exchange Online plan, where you're literally only getting email. It's not included, but it's, you know, pretty much included with the vast majority of plans that people would use on a day-to-day basis.
Cool. And how would Alex review his current plan to ensure that Teams is part of it, Finian?
Yeah, simply my details are there on screen. If you want to just drop me a quick note on that, we can help you out looking at what licenses you have and, you know, is it included or not.
Excellent. Can shifts be accessed by mobile workers / frontline guys without a full Teams account? So work shifts from Paddy.
Yeah, specific enough question, Paddy. Yes, they need an account to be able to access that, and they need to be licensed for it. So again, those frontline workers having the frontline SKU or being given some other kind of Office 365 license that includes Teams, they'll need to have that in order to be able to use shifts.
And Dulta has just got on to me there to correct her name pronunciation. So apologies for that, Dulta. My Gaelic failed me on this one, but a lovely name. Can you API with Salesforce, in particular the first line aspect of Teams? Tony,
yeah, again, very specific question on that. I suppose the straight answer is I don't know. I'm not sure what you're fully trying to do there. I suppose if Salesforce has an open API, which it does, and you're obviously familiar with, you can use some kind of connector to integrate that with Teams. So you could use something like Microsoft Flow to pull data from Salesforce into Teams and deliver that out to people. So I'm sure it can be done what you're looking to do, Tony, but I just don't have enough detail to drill into that in any further detail.
Might be one to follow up offline, Tony. Thanks a million. You were talking about two-factor authentication. Do you set two-factor authentication and other security settings within MS Teams? From Stefan.
Yeah, so you don't do it within Teams. And again, I would always highlight the difference between two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication. Very much we all in ActionPoint always speak about multi-factor authentication with what's called conditional access. And not to get too complicated with on this webinar, to do simple two-factor authentication can often be very invasive for the end users. You know, having to reply to a text message every time they want to do something can be very, very annoying. Whereby using something like multi-factor authentication with conditional access looks at things like, where is that computer, where is that person coming in from? Are they on a company-owned device? Do I actually need to prompt them for the multi-factor in the first place, or can they just come in with a username and password? So there's varying differences there. And to go back to your original question there, that is set up within your actual Microsoft 365 tenant.
Thanks, Finian. Sorry, I just lost my great. Another one from Tony. Finally, what are ballpark costs for company license X number of users and add-on elements?
That's another, it depends on Tony. More than happy, my details are on screen there. So if you want to follow up, I think you've actually posted your email in there, so we can follow up with you with more details on that to get a sense of what your requirements are. I suppose with everything Microsoft, there are a lot of different SKUs and a lot of different plans. So, you know, it can be something very, very small to very, very big, depending on what you need. So look, we'll follow up with you directly on that.
I think that's most of the questions. There was just one from Stephen McCracken. Why are you using GoTo instead of Teams for this Teams webinar?
Yeah, I'll take that one. It's down to the management. So Teams is a great product from a collaboration, remote working point of view, you know, delivering that video access experience. The reason we use GoToMeeting specifically for these webinars is the outside management piece. So managing the registration, managing the surveys thereafter, and doing the simple things like that. So, you know, we've delivered this same webinar actually over Teams. It worked perfectly, worked seamlessly. The only downside is it involved a lot more manual work from a registration and follow-up point of view.
Yeah, I concur with that. Guys, if there's any more questions, I'll just give an extra minute here if you want to get something in quickly for Finian. As I said, do check us out on LinkedIn, ActionPoint Technology Group, and check us out on Twitter at ActionPoint Tech. We're posting all of our remote working content through those channels. And for any, if you want a review, if you want to look at our remote working services, go to www.actionpoint.ie/remote working. So, you know, happy to connect with you there. Our webinar series will continue in the days and weeks to come. So do check out actionpoint.ie/academy. I know of a lot of URLs there, so I might just put them in the email on the follow-up to this webinar. I think that's everything. Just a couple of thanks coming in. Appreciate all the nice feedback, guys. I would ask, guys, if you could just take the survey directly after this webinar. We really appreciate your feedback, and it's helping us to improve the content delivery to our audience. So I think that's everything, Finian. Oh, wait.
That's great. Thanks, Peter, and thanks very much to everyone.
Wait, I just have one more question. No, that's it. Sorry. Thank you very much. Okay. Cheers, guys.